Hi, this is Chris with Scout Animation Studio. I just wanted to talk about how I made this. So first we're going to delete everything in the scene. We're going to add in a simple plane and just tab into edit mode, hit 7 on your numpad for the top view. We're just going to scale this down to roughly make the width of a fish and then scale down after we extrude along the x-axis. Extrude these out along the x-axis as well. Take a little bit longer for the tail, and we're just trying to get a rough shape for a fish. We will bevel the two edges here, and then we'll select that front edge and then go into vertice mode and then bevel them. Then we'll just grab that center edge or the middle two vertices, and with proportional editing we'll just drag that out along the x-axis just to give it a little bit more of a point and make it not as rounded, and that looks good. And we'll do the same thing along the tail so we can give those a little bit more of a curve. Then I just animate it. I just give it a simple driver along the x-axis, but put a negative symbol, otherwise it will go backwards. So give it a negative symbol so that it goes negatively along the x-axis, and then we can speed it up a bit, and then it drives it a little bit faster. Then I'll add a subdivision surface modifier, and I'll also give it a bit of extra geometry just by adding a line or a loop cut down the middle. From here, we can just go into a displacement modifier, if I can find it. Then we'll just click new. We'll click this little tab, which takes us directly to the modifier adjustment. We can scale up the size of the cloud texture, and we'll tell it to move along the y-axis. Make sure we set the coordinates to global. So I accidentally selected the wrong one there. So we want the coordinates to be on global, and that way as it moves along there, it gives it the illusion that it is swimming or even being distorted by water if we're looking down at it. And then we duplicate it. And instead of going with the same one, we make another one with another texture, and we make this scale just a little bit bigger for even larger distortion. And then we can scale it up. So just play with the settings, and eventually you'll get what you need. For the texture, when you increase it, it actually stops at 2, but you can increase it for even larger motion or a larger distortion, something that's not as fine as those smaller ones. Then I go back and I play with the strength again. I really don't like how much it's doing it. I probably would have done it at a larger scale just to get a little bit more of that swoosh in it and not have as much distortion. And there you can really see those distortions taking place, so it looks like a fish that's actually swimming around if you're looking from a top view. And that's really what I'm trying to go for, is just making a really basic illusion of a fish, because we're just making a plane. And I actually go into edit mode for the texturing because I don't want it to look distorted while I'm texturing it. So going into edit mode keeps everything in its original position. And then I can add in a noise texture and a color ramp. And then we'll just drag that over. And I actually turn the black to an orange, and then I keep the white as white because I want it to look like a koi fish. You can also just drag that color over and drop turn off normalize, and that gives me a little bit of a harder edge. And you can play with the color ramp a bit just to make those lines a little bit harder. You don't want them exactly like straight lines. If you wanted them very hard lines, make sure to set linear to constant on the color ramp. If you're going for something more stylized, this is semi-stylized. I add a little bit more detail, more to the roughness. So it's in between stylized and realistic here. Make sure you turn on your Node Wrangler just by going up to Edit and Preferences. I thought that location would help me out here for when I duplicate them, but unfortunately, when you see that I do duplicate the fish here, it's still going to be the same texture no matter where I put the fish. If I wanted each fish to look different, then I would have to make a new texture for each fish that I make. And then I would probably change the noise texture from 3D to 4D, and then just adjust the W just so that each one looks different. So here I am making the fins. And then I add a bevel onto it. And it still doesn't look right how I wanted it, so then I scale these down a bit. And for going around and selecting those vertices, if I click the first one, and I can actually go and hold Control and click the other one, and that selects them along the shortest route. Sometimes you have to click along the route a couple of times. If you have more vertices in one direction than in the other, it might not go in the direction that you want, so just be mindful of that. And I just duplicate it and I scale it along the y-axis. So I did a scale y -1, and that flips it. You can get the same effect by doing a rotate x 180. It would be the same thing. And then I just moved it roughly in the same exact mirrored spot by eye. It doesn't have to be accurate. So I thought that that looked good. The next thing that I wanted to do here, I think I just moved the fins down because I'm actually going to add a thickness modifier, a solidify modifier. And when I go and add the solidify modifier, I bring that up to the top because I want the subdivision surface to be affected by it. And when I increase it, you can see that that back fin is going down, and I want the fins to solidify in the same direction. So I go into edit mode, I select one of the vertices of the opposite fin, and then I hit Control L to select linked, do Shift N and recalculate the normals, and check inside on the tab in the bottom corner, and that flips it so that the normals will face the same direction, and we have the thickness going in the same way. And all that does is give a nice appearance that the fish is sort of rounded when looking at it from the top, without adding a whole bunch of geometry, which I thought was a pretty neat trick. Here I am doing Control Shift click on a wave texture, and I'm adding in a wave texture here, scaling the white down, because I thought I was going to use the white as the in-between for the scales. I'm going to rotate this at 45 degrees, and then I'll select everything, duplicate it, and I'll use a math add node and combine both of them, I'll do another shift click, or control shift click, and then I'll have the other wave texture go at a negative 45-degree angle along the z-axis, and I scale those to be roughly the same, and then that make sure that the distances are the same on the color ramps, and you get this diamond pattern going across it. After that, I use a bump node, plug it into the height, and then we can plug the normal into the normal. And then when we control shift click everything on the principled BSDF, you have the bump texture. I invert it because I used white as the between lines. So white will now be the recessed areas, and that gives you that look of scales. Again, I would probably use this if it was just a far away shot of the koi. It's not really like a focus of the shot, just something that would be added in a shot. So then I use the camera, and we're going to do a copy location, and we're going to select the fish, and I only want it to track along the X and Y axis. Its Y location doesn't move because the origin stays the same. We're only moving the fish along the X axis, so that's why the camera doesn't move along the Y axis as it's being displaced, because its origin still only stays along the X axis. And then I throw together a quick world texture, which is a lot more in depth than what it should have been. So all I did for the background texture was add in a sky texture, and then I throw that into a background node with a mix shader, and then do a light path camera as ray, and that eliminates any sort of lighting that the sky texture does to the environment, and it only affects the objects in the world. And then for the background, I do a little sort of mix of a gradient set to linear displacement with a mix shader that's being controlled by a noise texture, and you get that wavy background in there. And the noise texture is set to 4D with a driver set to like 2000 on the W, and that has the background move. If you want a little bit more of an in-depth tutorial on that, the only other thing that I would really change is having the background move along with the fish, because in my final render I did not do that, and it just makes the fish look static and like it's just waving back and forth in the water without going anywhere. It's kind of a weird look. But yeah, let me know what you think, and yeah, I hope to make more of these videos.